The Langstons seemed to have it all. Behind the iron gates of their sprawling estate in Millstone Valley, New Hampshire, stood a family draped in privilege and power. The patriarch, Jonathan Langston, was a 58-year-old billionaire who had transformed a modest logistics startup into a global empire. His influence stretched far beyond his industry, touching political circles, high society galas, and philanthropy events where his name was spoken with admiration. Yet, for all his power, he demanded just as much control in his personal life. Jonathan's wife, Victoria, played her role with precision. Always impeccably dressed, always in the right place at the right time, she was the glamorous face of the family. But whispers of her extravagant spending and rumors of infidelity painted a far less flattering picture behind closed doors. Their children, Ryan and Sophia, each carried their own burdens under the Langston name. Ryan, the eldest, struggled to meet his father's exacting standards as he prepared to take over the family business. Sophia, fiercely independent but financially reckless, distanced herself, attempting to carve out an identity far from her father's shadow. On the surface, they were untouchable. Dinner parties were hosted with elegance, their presence commanded respect, and their wealth shielded them from scrutiny. Yet, those who knew the Langstons closely often noticed cracks in the foundation, quiet arguments, sharp glances exchanged in public, and moments of tension masked behind polite smiles. Then came the night that shattered it all. It was a quiet evening in July 2018 when Jonathan was found dead in his study. Slumped over his antique desk, his hand rested near a glass of scotch, a drink he favored as a nightly ritual. At first, it seemed like a tragic accident, a man working late, perhaps succumbing to a heart attack. But the autopsy told a different story. Traces of a rare and lethal toxin were found in his system, a poison that had been carefully administered. The scotch he cherished had become the instrument of his demise. The family's story began unraveling almost immediately. There were inconsistencies in their accounts of the evening, timelines that didn't add up, and an air of unease among those closest to him. The Langstons' carefully crafted image of unity and success was about to be torn apart, thread by thread, as investigators dug deeper into what truly happened that fateful night. Jonathan Langston built his empire brick by brick. From a modest logistics startup to a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse, his story was one of relentless ambition and unmatched precision. But behind the polished facade of his professional success lay a man whose demands at home were as exacting as they were in the boardroom. To Jonathan, control wasn't optional, it was necessary. And those who couldn't meet his standards, even within his family, often found themselves at the receiving end of his wrath. Victoria Langston, his wife, played the role of the perfect partner with practiced ease. To the world, she was the epitome of grace, a dazzling figure at charity balls and society galas. But her love for luxury and whispers of a scandalous past told a different story. Behind closed doors, Jonathan and Victoria clashed often. She resented his control over the family's finances and his cold demeanor, while he questioned her loyalty and reckless spending. And then there was the rumor, the personal trainer she seemed just a little too friendly with. Was it just idle gossip? Or was it the crack in their marriage that would eventually widen into a chasm? The Langston children were no strangers to the pressures of the family name. Ryan, the eldest at 30, bore the weight of his father's expectations. Groomed to take over the family business, he lived in a constant state of tension, his every decision scrutinized. His failures, whether real or perceived, were magnified under Jonathan's unforgiving gaze. For Ryan, success wasn't just a goal, it was survival in a household where failure was not an option. Sophia, at 27, was the polar opposite of her brother. A free spirit with a passion for art, she had tried to escape the Langston shadow, opening her own gallery in downtown Millstone Valley. But her dreams quickly turned into a financial nightmare. The debts piled up, and, with no way out, she reluctantly turned back to the very family she had tried to distance herself from. To Jonathan, her financial instability was proof of her irresponsibility. To Sophia, his judgment was suffocating. The tension in the Langston household simmered constantly. Jonathan's sharp words and disapproving glances were daily occurrences. Victoria's icy responses and occasional outbursts punctuated their strained marriage. Ryan's attempts to win his father's approval only deepened his resentment, while Sophia's defiance added fuel to the fire. But there was something deeper, an unspoken competition between Ryan and Sophia. While Ryan worked tirelessly to prove himself as the rightful heir to the family empire, Sophia's refusal to conform seemed to garner a strange respect from their mother. Did Victoria favor her daughter's rebellion over her son's obedience? And what about Jonathan? Did he see Sophia's independence as strength or weakness? These questions loomed large, creating rifts that only grew wider with time. Yet, for all the tension, no one in the Langston family could have predicted how far it would go. What were they truly capable of when pushed to their limits? And when the moment came to choose between loyalty and survival, who would cross the line first? As secrets bubbled beneath the surface and rivalries turned sharper, one truth became clear. In the Langston family, trust was as rare as the fortune they guarded. It was a summer evening like any other at the Langston estate. The sprawling mansion sat bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, a picture of tranquility. But inside the grand study, the heart of the estate, an unsettling stillness loomed. On a seemingly ordinary summer evening, Jonathan Langston was found lifeless in his study, slumped over his mahogany desk with a half-empty glass of scotch. What appeared at first to be a tragic heart attack quickly unraveled into something far darker. Traces of a rare, lethal toxin were discovered in his drink, confirming his death was no accident. It was murder. The Langston family, who had gathered for a tense dinner the night before, became the focus of the investigation. Victoria, usually poised, appeared detached and unnervingly cold. Ryan and Sophia gave conflicting accounts of the evening, each casting suspicion on the other. Adding to the mystery, the estate's security footage for that night had mysteriously vanished, leaving a critical gap in the timeline. Why was Jonathan alone after such a strained dinner? Who had access to the toxin? And why did the family's reaction seem more guarded than grieving? With every revelation, it became clear that Jonathan's death was a deliberate act, and someone within the Langston family had orchestrated it. The investigation into Jonathan Langston's death quickly turned into a labyrinth of motives, secrets, and shocking discoveries. As detectives delved deeper into the lives of the Langston family, each member emerged as a suspect with a motive that couldn't be ignored. Victoria Langston was the first to fall under scrutiny. As Jonathan's wife of 35 years, she stood to inherit a staggering $250 million fortune, not to mention the lavish estate and assets tied to his empire. Detectives uncovered financial records revealing that Victoria had recently opened an offshore account, a move that raised eyebrows. Was she planning to start a new life without Jonathan? And if so, why would she need to do it in secret? Ryan Langston, the heir apparent, had his own reasons to feel cornered. Just weeks before his father's death, Jonathan had threatened to cut him out of the will after a heated argument about the future of the family business. Ryan's performance as a leader had been underwhelming in his father's eyes, and the pressure was mounting. If Jonathan had gone through with his threat, Ryan stood to lose everything: his inheritance, his reputation, and the empire he had been groomed to inherit. Sophia's motives, while less direct, were just as compelling. Her failed gallery ventures had left her drowning in debt, forcing her to turn to her father for financial support she resented needing. Detectives found evidence of late-night internet searches on her laptop. Terms like undetectable poisons and inheritance laws. Were these idle curiosities, or was Sophia preparing for something far more sinister? The most damning discovery came from an unlikely place: Victoria's jewelry box. Nestled among sparkling necklaces and gleaming rings was a small vial of liquid later confirmed to be the same toxin found in Jonathan's system. Victoria insisted she had no idea how it got there. But how could such a deadly substance find its way into her personal belongings without her knowledge? Then there were the messages, cryptic texts exchanged between Ryan and Sophia. One message from Ryan read, "This is our chance to start fresh. Don't mess this up." Another from Sophia, "I just want this to be over. I can't live like this anymore." The tone was ominous, the intent unclear, but the timing was undeniable. The messages were sent the night before Jonathan's death. What exactly were they planning, and why? Finally, forensic evidence pointed to a chilling detail. Traces of the toxin were found on a spoon in the kitchen, a utensil that had likely been used to mix the poison into Jonathan's scotch. The kitchen was a shared space, used by everyone in the house. Yet, when asked who had prepared Jonathan's drink that evening, all three Langstons gave vague or conflicting answers. Who handled the spoon? And why was no one willing to take responsibility for such a seemingly mundane act? As the evidence mounted, so did the questions. Why would Victoria risk hiding the poison in such an obvious place? Were Ryan and Sophia working together, or were their cryptic messages taken out of context? And the spoon, was it a careless oversight, or a deliberate attempt to implicate someone else? Each revelation pulled the investigation in a new direction, leaving detectives and the public wondering, were these clues leading to the truth, or were they part of an elaborate smokescreen created by a family desperate to protect their secrets? What do you think? Was it greed, desperation, or something else entirely? And which piece of evidence do you think is the most incriminating? Let us know in the comments below. The courtroom was packed. The Langston family trial had become a media frenzy, with every twist and turn broadcast to a captivated public. Prosecutors and defense attorneys sparred in a battle to expose or obscure the truth. It was a spectacle of power, privilege, and betrayal that gripped the nation. The prosecution wasted no time painting Victoria Langston as the architect of her husband's murder. Their argument was simple but damning. Victoria, burdened by years of resentment and fueled by greed, had orchestrated the perfect crime. They leaned heavily on her financial dealings, particularly the offshore account she opened just weeks before Jonathan's death. It wasn't a coincidence, they argued. It was premeditation. They brought forward witnesses who testified about Victoria's tumultuous relationship with her husband. Former staff members recounted heated arguments and moments when Victoria, in a fit of frustration, had allegedly said things like, "Life would be easier without Jonathan," or "I wish he'd just disappear." To bolster their case, they highlighted her conflicting alibis about the evening of Jonathan's death. Why had she told investigators one version of events, only to revise it days later? Was it a memory lapse or a carefully calculated lie? Victoria's defense team fought back with a narrative just as compelling. Ryan Langston was the true puppet master. They argued that he had skillfully used his mother's unhappiness and his sister's financial troubles to manipulate them into participating, willingly or not, in his plan to eliminate his father. Ryan, they pointed out, had the most to gain. Jonathan had recently threatened to cut him out of the will after a public argument, leaving Ryan desperate to secure his place in the family empire. The defense painted him as cunning and ruthless, willing to exploit his family's weaknesses for his own benefit. Sophia's testimony was the emotional center of the defense's case. On the stand, she broke down, recounting the relentless pressure she felt from both her father and brother. Tears streamed down her face as she described how Ryan had approached her with vague but ominous suggestions about taking control of their future. She insisted she didn't fully understand what he meant at the time, but the implication was clear. The trial's most shocking moment came midway through, when Sophia, under intense cross-examination, suddenly confessed. Her voice trembled as she admitted to slipping the poison into her father's drink. "I did it," she said, her words barely above a whisper. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. "I put the poison in his scotch, but I didn't want to. I had no choice." Sophia claimed she acted alone, but under pressure from Ryan. According to her, Ryan had threatened to expose her mounting debts and personal failings to their father if she didn't comply. He said it was the only way to keep the family together. "I didn't know what else to do," she sobbed. Her confession threw the courtroom into chaos. Prosecutors scrambled to adjust their strategy, while the defense attempted to shift the narrative once again. The jury's decision came swiftly, yet the weight of its delivery left the courtroom in stunned silence. Sophia Langston sat motionless, her face pale, as the judge read the sentence: 20 years in prison for second-degree murder. Outside, the public reaction was anything but quiet. News outlets and social media lit up with debates, many unwilling to accept the outcome. Theories swirled, with some convinced that Victoria and Ryan had masterfully orchestrated the crime, using Sophia as their pawn. Others argued Sophia's confession was clear-cut evidence of her guilt and that the acquittals were just. Victoria retreated into the shadows of her former life. Once the queen of high society, she now faced a world where her name was whispered only with disdain. The glamorous galas and charity events where she once thrived were closed to her, the invitations disappearing like smoke in the wind. Her once pristine reputation now lay in ruins, and the opulent estate that had symbolized her wealth became her fortress of isolation. Ryan, determined to salvage his place in the world, threw himself into the family business. Yet, his leadership was tainted. Business partners grew distant, shareholders grew wary, and whispers of his alleged involvement in the murder persisted. Every decision he made was scrutinized, every move questioned. He walked through life as a man under constant suspicion, his father's empire now a gilded cage. From her prison cell, Sophia offered glimpses of her side of the story. In one interview, her voice cracked as she admitted, "I thought I was protecting them. I thought I was doing what was right for the family. But now I see they were protecting themselves." Her words reignited the debate, sparking fresh outrage and speculation. Was she a sacrificial lamb, coerced into taking the fall? Or had her desperation truly driven her to murder? The Langston family, once revered, now stood as a cautionary tale. Their wealth, their influence, their carefully curated image, all of it had crumbled under the weight of greed and betrayal. The estate, a sprawling symbol of their success, became a haunting reminder of their darkest hour. And yet, for all the court proceedings, the confessions and the accusations, one question remained unanswered. Who was truly responsible for Jonathan Langston's death? In a family so fractured, so consumed by ambition and secrets, could the truth ever be fully known? The Langston case leaves us with haunting questions. Did Sophia act alone, or was she protecting her family? Could Ryan and Victoria have manipulated her, or was her confession genuine? The missing security footage, hidden accounts, and conflicting stories suggest there's more to the Langston family than meets the eye. Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping stories. Even the wealthiest families can hide the darkest truths.